I'm going to talk about an emotion that is usually misconstrued, and that's only because it's represented in two different ways. It's received in two different ways. This is an emotion that is often celebrated and then other times vilified in what the outcome can be. I'm going to talk about anger. Anger is one thing that you can't go to a class unless it's too far gone. You don't go to a school that teaches you about anger, how to manage it, how to use it to be productive, nothing of that nature. And some people have great role models. Some people have the parents that can teach them how to understand and control their anger, teach them not to use it in a harmful or disrespectful way. But in other times in life, people don't have that. People don't get the chance to understand what their anger causes. Like for any sports player, if you're angry on the court, there's a half that perceives you as passionate, driven, hardworking, and there is another half that sees you as disrespectful, misunderstood. How many times have you been in a situation where maybe a significant other has pushed your buttons just to get that reaction out of you, just to get a rise out of you? How many times have you been told you don't care enough because you didn't get angry? Anger is often celebrated and also vilified because we have seen way too many times in life where a significant other, a best friend, whoever it may be, push those same buttons to get a reaction, to see that emotion, because their thought process is when they get angry, they care, which means I've won. That's their thought process. But when the button is pressed way too many times and that anger turns into violence, that anger turns into rude words, insults, things of that nature, then all of a sudden now it is vilified. Men often don't stand a chance when it comes to anger because physical violence towards anyone is the result of that. And anytime there's physical, domestic, whatever violence it may be, it is immediately pointed towards the men. Men, we have to protect ourselves. We have to understand where we are in life and who we are before that anger sets in. I used to have moments where I would black out. I was so angry. I used to have moments where I would physically hurt someone to the point I could not stop because of my anger. I didn't understand it. I didn't know where it would take me. I didn't care to understand where it would take me because I thought when I got angry, it's because I cared, which in my life was celebrated. But I did not understand the path that it took me on that left me being vilified by my own emotions. I used to think in relationships, fighting was normal. Fighting was a thing that could happen because you had to show your anger. You had to show that emotion for them to know that you're passionate. And then I found out that is the most toxic way of thinking. Because when you sit down, after all the yelling and screaming and fighting, you're more than likely going to have that conversation again because nothing was heard. There's a phrase that follows me my entire life, and that is, raise your point, not your voice. My father was not a yeller. He was not a screamer. He didn't do any of those things because he knew that the moment that he started yelling, nothing was heard. Instead, he raised his point. He always lets you know why. And when it comes to anger, before you let it fester you have to display your point. You have to let them know why. Because if not, especially if you don't have control of that anger, that leads you down a path where you do end up physically hurting someone till you can't stop, till you do black out and not understand where you're going, till you are the point of being vilified because you thought the passion you were displaying was justified. Anger, by no means, is an outlet of positivity. Because every time you dive into that, any time that you self-justify being angry, the only thing you're doing is making an excuse to have a vessel from being celebrated to being a villain. Men, we don't need to be villains anymore. Matter of fact, anyone that's listening to this, there's no reason to be a villain in your own story. Anger is hard. Anger is not something that'll be solved overnight. And yes, there are times where anger will be celebrated in the right context. Because when Tom Brady gets angry at a referee and gets fired up, guess what? It's justified. It's passion. It's emotion. But we have to use it in the right context. We have to use it where it's beneficial, not when it's detrimental. Anger plagued a lot of my life, and I vowed that it would never happen again. There are times where things are going to be rough. There are times where you feel you need to punch a wall or break something or throw something. What does that solve? Where do you go from punching a wall that gets you any closer to not being as mad? Because guess what? Now you're mad, your hand hurts. Where does throwing anything get you any closer to solving the issue at hand? It doesn't. Not in the slightest. We have to understand who we are. And we have to understand that anger is a two-sided coin. It's either celebrated or it's vilified. And the only thing that we should be determined to do is be on the side of celebration.